Good evening, everybody. I'm Sharona Bishop sitting in for Lou Dobbs tonight. Well, the House Oversight Committee has subpoenaed 3 White House aides regarding Joe Biden's rapidly deteriorating health. Anyone with eyes can see that has been happening in real time. First Lady Jill Biden is among those who received a subpoena from Republican Oversight Chair James Comer. Democrats are getting more of the medicine they love to dish out, but they hate to take it themselves. Let's see if they comply. But unlike the Democrats, these subpoenas are totally legitimate and they are warranted. Recall that this year, Biden met with a neurologist specializing in Parkinson's disease at least 8 times. Biden's participation in that meeting was hidden from the public until just recently. The New York Post reported that 4 people had been involved, including Biden's physician, but could not identify the one mystery person. We now know that that was Joe Biden. What's plan B for the Democrat Party? It's the Vice President, Kamala Harris. And if Biden were to drop out tomorrow, Harris would receive a $240 million war chest. Kamala, however, has negative charisma. She never garnered more than 5% of the Democrat support when she herself was running for president. She might actually be a worse choice than brain dead Biden. But it's unclear how and if Democrats could transfer that enormous amount of money to anyone else. However, one thing is very crystal clear. They aim to dump Biden. According to Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll, more than half of Democrats say that Biden should step down. When you combine that data point with the fact that Trump is dominating in the polls and the elites are also turning on Biden, November is wrapping up to be a real doomsday for the Democrats. Joining us now to discuss all of this is veteran pollster John McLaughlin, CEO at McLaughlin and Associates. John, thank you for joining us. This is very interesting times we're living in. Tell us a little bit more about this. That Donald Trump is looking at a landslide right now, or is it still closer than people want to think? This idea that Biden and Trump are neck and neck just seems preposterous to me.
Well, Trump is leading, and he's leading in all the battleground states. The Emerson polls that were out just a day ago were accurate, and Trump led in every state. He's leading in the Real Clear Politics average in every state. He'd probably get well over 300 electoral votes today. A lot of those averages don't include the fact that in mid-June, way before the debate, the Trump campaign released our Minnesota survey where we had Trump up by 4 points in Minnesota over Joe Biden. We're neck and neck in Virginia. We may be ahead today. We're neck and neck in New Jersey. New Jersey hasn't been in play for the Republicans for decades. And New York, the Democrats are freaking out in New York because the Siena poll, which did not have Robert Kennedy included, who we know in New York is a well-known liberal, very liberal positions on banning oil and gas and weak on crime, weak on immigration. He's a well-known liberal, but he wasn't included in the Siena poll. And Trump was losing only by 8 points in New York. No Republicans won New York State since 1984 for Ronald Reagan. So, you put Kennedy in that mix and New York's in play. And that's why the Democrats are freaking out, because they're all getting polls back after the debate. And they're saying, oh, we wanted to be ahead for Congress so we could take the House. And they're not. They're losing. And Donald Trump's ahead in those districts. And so you're seeing a big reaction from the Democrats to, oh, we've got to dump the captain of the Titanic because we've hit an iceberg. Well, they drove it into the iceberg, and they're all responsible, whether it's Kamala Harris, who we had right before the debate in our national poll on McLaughlinOnline.com. She was trailing Trump by 5 points. Biden was trailing by 2 in the poll that we released. And guess what? She's less popular than he is. And so are all these other candidates, whether it's Gavin Newsom, whether it's Pritzker, whether it's Whitmer, whether it's Josh Stein. They're all culpable of the same thing. Open borders, high inflation, endless wars, high crime. They've all got these issues. So I don't know why they want to dump the guy only because he's losing to Donald Trump. They're all losing to Donald Trump.
It seems like they just want to be able to blame him for the loss in November and then start fresh again. But I think that there is just too much ego. There's too much arrogance in that party. The shock and awe that they pretended to have when the rest of the American people knew Biden was already in decline is really incredible. Fascinating to watch all of this implode. Kamala Harris, let's talk about her. They want to jump over Kamala, but can they even do that? Would she allow that?
I tell you what, the strangest thing is, how can you ask Biden to withdraw for president, that he can't be a candidate for president, but then you leave him as president? Joe Biden, if Joe Biden can't be their candidate for president, why would you leave him in control of the nuclear button? Why would you leave him in control of the country's safety and our economic program, et cetera? I mean, I thought in the debate, I thought Donald Trump did excellent. He drew a contrast on the issues. And I tell you what, Joe Biden, for those old timers who remember Reagan against Mondale, Joe Biden is the first person to run in a presidential race that he wants to raise taxes. I mean, when he says he wants the Trump tax cut to be repealed and go away, that means you're going to have the largest tax increase in the history of the United States. Do you know what that'll do to the economy? We'll have high unemployment, jobs will leave America, tax rates will go sky high again, and we'll have, instead of having a soft landing or a recession, because in that poll that we did right before the debate, 50% of all Americans think that the country's already in recession because of high inflation. And they think it's getting worse, not better, 62 to 31. But it's inflation. And so you want to raise taxes? That's only going to compound inflation and make things a lot worse for a lot of people. Another reason why we have to get Donald Trump elected, major reason why Donald Trump won that debate, was his positive pro-growth messages and his stance versus Biden's record of failure on the economy.
John, do you think that the American people are drawing the parallel there between their lives being completely disarray, not having the value of their money anymore, with what the Democrats are actually doing? Are they too committed and obligated to the Democrat Party to see that it is their leadership that has brought them to the position they're in? When you're doing these polling questions, are they making that association that it's the Democrat Party policies that have put them where they're at?
When you talk policies, they are, which is why the Democrats are busy talking about age, because they don't want to talk about their failed policies. I mean, yesterday I saw from Steve Moore, my friend Steve Moore, put out an economic statistic where under Donald Trump, real wage growth adjusted for inflation went up $4,200 during his term in office as compared to the time that Biden has in office, where it's gone down $2,100. So with Biden as president, adjusted for inflation, your wages are worth less by $2,100, while when Donald Trump was president, inflation was less than 2%. Real wages went up $4,200 for the average American worker. So that's a big difference, and people know it. They don't. When you go, I've had more people in the last week over July 4th tell me about their supermarket bills compared to now to when Trump was president, and people know that. If you ask the pivotal question, or were you better off 4 years ago than you are today? They know they were better off under Donald Trump in spite of COVID. When they were coming out of COVID, there was optimism, there was economic growth, there was low taxes, low inflation, and it took 3.5 years for Joe Biden to screw it all up, but he did. And so the American voters, they make that. 66% of all voters were telling us in the last poll the country's on the wrong track. I mean,
Well,
I've seen other polls,
if
it's over 70.
Yeah, if 66% of the voters, as you're saying, are saying they recognize we're not doing well under this regime, would a facelift help them? Would putting in a new candidate help them? Will they associate their failures with Biden, or are they associating it with the Democrat Party? And I guess that's really the crux of my real question.
The only way it would change is if they change on their issue stance. They want a facelift, but underneath it all, you still got the same ugly policies. And it's just, you still have open borders. They still oppose the wall. They still oppose. They want higher taxes. It's not that they oppose tax cuts. It's they want the largest tax increase in the history of the United States. When you repeal the Trump tax cuts, it will be the largest tax increase in the history of the United States. We will have no growth. We'll go backwards. They also want weaker policies on national defense and at home when we're dealing with crime. In New York, for example, you have cashless bail Democrats. They have these terrible murders for these illegal immigrants coming in. They're murdering people. They're killing people. They're shooting cops. And what do the Democrats in New York do? They let them go. Alvin Bragg finds millions of dollars to go after Donald Trump. But if you were vandalizing and protesting on behalf of Hamas at Columbia University, let you all go. And it's unbelievable. If you have murder, you have cop killers, people that shoot cops that have been let go multiple times in the system in New York. But that's where the Democrat Party, that's what they believe in. And so unless they do a major radical facelift, or not facelift, but the radical change of their core policies, um, it's still the same. It doesn't matter who their candidate is. It's the same failed policies, and that's what Donald Trump's running against.
Absolutely. Well, the pressure from people like Clooney, do you think that's going to help them get Biden out? I mean, I know they're Hollywood elites, but they seem to have some type of voice. I see this leaning on Taylor Swift again. They're really amping her up for the younger vote. Do you think that will have any impact on removing Biden?
Actually, it will, because of their fundraising prowess. I mean, all these radicals like George Clooney, and by the way, George Clooney's wife works for, like, she's an international lawyer. She's trying to get Bibi Netanyahu locked up for fighting against Hamas. I mean, it's like bizarre stuff that they represent. But they had that big fundraiser for in Hollywood for Joe Biden, where Obama had to lead him off the stage. They know Joe Biden's been, not good shape. They know he's elderly, he's old, unlike Donald Trump, who's in good shape, mentally sharp, top of his game. I mean, unbelievable. But George Clooney knows this. But you know what? He's decided, well, if Joe Biden is debating Donald Trump and can't beat him in the debate, we're going to have to, and still losing in the polls. It's all about the polls. Because Joe Biden's losing, they want to replace him. Well, the next fool is going to be losing too, because Donald Trump's right and they're all wrong on the issues. Mm-hmm. And until they wake up and change their policies and moderate to some degree, or even move to the right, they're gonna lose. And this is like, again, I mentioned this, old guys. In 1980, Jimmy Carter was running against Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter was a failed president. This is an even better story. Going back to, I met Donald Trump after he was out of office in Mar-a-Lago. I was going through a poll. Myself, Jason Williams, Brian Jack were there. And I said, you realize 2/3 of the Americans want you to run again for president. This is after he left the White House like a month earlier. And he's watching the Democrats try to impeach him as a private citizen. And I said, 2/3 of Republicans want you to run again. And he's listening to me. And I said, you realize when Biden's policies fail, there'll be buyer's remorse and you can beat him for president again. And I just never thought Biden would fail as quickly and as badly as he has. So that analogy of when Reagan debated Carter, it was in October. And before that debate in the polls, it was close election. Reagan, for every favorable, he had an unfavorable. People didn't like him. He was too old, too conservative, and he was going to blow up the world. When they saw him in the debate and he said, were you better off 4 years ago than you were, today? And he also said, there you go again, Mr. President. All of a sudden, an explosion in the polls. Reagan wins in a landslide. The difference today is Donald Trump debated Joe Biden in June, not in October. And the Democrats are in a panic because they realize the same thing. We are not better off today than we were 4 years ago under Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is the real thing. He's got the policies, the vision, the commitment, the determination to make sure that America becomes prosperous and is at peace again. And that's what you're going to see at the Republican convention next week. And it doesn't matter who they put up, because the Democrat Party is a failed party with policies of open border, high inflation. They'll drive jobs to foreign countries. We'll have crime in our streets. And the endless wars, whether it's Ukraine and the Middle East, are going to continue if the Democrats are to control.
I mean, we're watching it happen right now. It's not something you have to predict, right? It's happening right now. John McLaughlin, thank you so much. Thank you for your insight and sharing this. You must be very optimistic. Thank you so much.
We've got a long time to go. And when the Democrats decided they're going to vote for the rights of illegal aliens to be able to vote in our elections yesterday, we cannot take anything for granted. We need to run as an underdog, and we need to run and make sure we have a free, fair election in November and win this election.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
In a New York Times op-ed, George Clooney called for Joe Biden to resign and make way for a new nominee. This is curious because just a couple weeks ago, Clooney headlined a major fundraiser for Biden. Clooney is an actor, but he is also part of the Democratic elite. And you know that if he's saying this, you better believe that Barack Obama is behind the scenes pushing this to get rid of Joe. In other news, liberals at The Daily Show are learning now that Black Americans aren't all that happy with the Democrat Party. Watch.
Okay, so who will you be voting for in 2024, Daryl?
Do I have to say his name? I don't want to, but more than likely it's going to be Trump.
Yeah, unbelievable.
then-
Unbelievable.
Who are you going to be voting for?
Biden.
And then Victor?
I'm with her.
Oh, Biden, okay.
Trump.
Eric, Trump?
Biden.
Biden?
Trump.
Okay, we're an even split, which I didn't see that coming. So do you think there's going to be a big shift, any sort of change?
I think it's going to be a big shift.
Me too.
Big shift?
Yes. Big
Really? Okay.
For me, I've always been a Democrat, and it's like for the most part with the Democratic Party, they always make a bunch of promises that they can't deliver.
Well, you can count on that sentiment to grow between now and November. Former Clinton strategist James Carville is one of the most sleazy and Machiavellian people in politics. He can also be bluntly honest about the state of his own party. Carville told CNN's Anderson Cooper that sticking with Biden means losing. In fact, he called it an idiotic choice. Watch.
No, I don't. And I think like Senator Patty Murray, who's been in the Senate for over 30 years, and the fact that she came out and said this speaks volumes as opposed to what people say in front of a camera. So I still think I'll stand by my thing that he won't run. But if he does, we're just making a idiotic choice for the future of our country. And I can't help but believe that. And the proof's in the pudding. They're moving states away from us. We're losing. We're not winning. And when we lose, America loses.
You're watching a full-scale media revolt against Joe Biden, a desperate effort to save an unsalvageable campaign. And with us tonight to talk about this is Orrin McIntyre. He's the host of Orrin McIntyre Show and a columnist at The Blaze. Orrin recently noted that the Democrat Party is only held together by one thing at this point, and it is resentment for the white male Christian man. That's all this election is really about for them. Listen to Joy Reid say the quiet part out loud.
Keeping that insane ideology of white Christian nationalism and white supremacy and white male Christian dominance out of power. That's all that matters. I genuinely don't care who the Democratic nominee is. And I'm being real. I don't care. If it's Biden, fine. If it's Kamala Harris, fabulous.
Wow, there you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. Orrin is joining us now. Orrin, thank you so much for joining us. This is a pretty serious issue. You know, when you see the deep swamp elite turning on Biden publicly, especially someone like Carville, he is a Clinton guy. He is a Democrat. He is solid. And now here he is calling for the removal of Biden. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very strange. Obviously, many of us on the right will look at the left, and because they control so many institutions, we often think of them as this monolith, just one opinion moving forward all the time. But obviously, that's not the case. We've seen that very much highlighted by the Israel-Palestine split inside the left recently. There are many different factions, and obviously, the media and many of the mainstream Democrats have suddenly gotten very jumpy when it comes to having Joe Biden in power or whoever's actually operating the Joe Biden administration. But it's also clear that there's this formal barrier to removing Biden. Ultimately, he does have the delegates. He does have access to all the campaign funds. He has the institutional momentum in his favor. And so now they're up in a hard position where it seems like they're having a lot of difficulty dislodging him.
Well, do you think this is somewhat of a coordinated effort by the Obamas and the Clinton campaigns to oust, at least to create this distrust and mistrust of the Biden administration right now with the Democrats?
Yeah, it's always weird. We're in this kind of late Soviet Union criminology type situation where you're trying to decode what the ruling class is actually trying to do. I think that ultimately a lot of these people thought that it was okay to rule the country through Joe Biden as some kind of puppet. They expected that the oligarchy could go ahead and use him as a shield. I mean, who's really going to blame Joe Biden for the open borders and the mass inflation? Because ultimately, he's just an old man who doesn't remember where he is or the name of his son or what he had for breakfast. But now they're getting really antsy. And yeah, it could be that some of these factions like the Obamas, who have never really liked Biden, ultimately have decided that they're sick of him. But like we said, his family obviously does not want to lose that power. And it does seem like they are the ones that are actually moving some of these levers at the end of the day. So now we have the showdown between these different factions.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you called it a long time ago. Biden's been in mental decline for some time. It's not news to us. We've been gaslit for a while by the MSN. Did you think it was really interesting that right after the debate, which many of us thought Biden actually did better than we thought he was going to do, he managed to stay on the stage the whole time, at least from what we could tell. Did you think it was interesting that the MSM decided then to act shocked and amazed and surprised that he was so badly he needed to be removed?
Yeah, the question is, of course, was this premeditated? Were they sick with him? There was some kind of call from the top to go ahead and spring at this moment? Or was it a preference cascade that was triggered by the fact that Biden looked very bad in that debate? It became very clear to the American people what was going on, and they panicked and said, oh, maybe we can't hold this guy. Maybe the amount of propping up that we're doing is not going to work in this scenario. Ultimately, I think what's really important to recognize is that there's probably not one solidified idea of what should be happening with the left. Again, it's a lot of infighting. It's a lot of people who recognize they have certain things to lose if Biden goes under. And what we really end up with is this situation where the press is playing the victim, right? They say, oh, how could the White House have lied to us this whole time? How could we have been deceived by these people when obviously they were in on it the whole time? Whatever reason they have for flipping the switch, it's very obvious that they knew what was going on.
I wonder, you tell me what you think about this. You're very connected with the people and what's happening on the ground too. Do you think it's possible that they really think they may have a shot at winning the election if they replace Biden with someone else? I mean, the billionaires withheld their money from Biden. Last week we heard several of them saying that they would potentially look at putting their money elsewhere if someone else was brought into the race. And anything can happen at the DNC convention. So what do you what are your thoughts on that?
It's possible. Ultimately, the Democrats have a machine politics that the right simply does not have. They have a lot of ground game. They have a lot vested, especially after 2020 when it comes to ballot harvesting. This is a massive advantage for them. And if they can get somebody who can get at least within a few points of Trump, they might be confident in their ability to then go ahead and push them over the edge by using the machine and maybe some methods that may not be on the level. But if you have a massive gap between somebody like Biden and Trump, it gets harder and harder to fudge those numbers. And so you see this panic setting in. The problem for them is, of course, that the heir apparent would be Kamala Harris. That would be what makes sense. But everyone knows that Kamala Harris is a disaster. We're seeing some polls floated right now that she could beat Trump. If you believe those, then I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. But ultimately, I think the Democrats realize that she is a disaster. But you can't just skip over a Black woman for someone like Gavin Newsom. That breaks all of their identity politics narratives. So they really painted themselves into a corner.
They have, and yet when we look at the scenario there where we've got the surprise, they were shocked to see that many Black Americans are going to be voting for Trump. What I'm curious about is they're going to vote for Trump if Biden is the alternative, or will they only vote for, or will they not vote for Trump if a new Democrat candidate is brought in? It's not a question I'm hearing a lot right now. It really does need consideration. Could that happen? And would those who seemingly are supporting and gathering around President Trump, these minority groups, would they change their vote simply because a new candidate was brought in? Because at heart, they are still true Democrats.
Yeah, you would think that somebody like Jim Clyburn saying, I'm still riding with Biden might mean that the African American community would still be with him. But like you said, it looks like maybe those numbers are getting pretty soft for the Democrats. If you move somebody like Kamala Harris in there, then you have the first Black woman president narrative. However, again, she's just incredibly unlikable and very inept, and nobody really likes her. anywhere. Now, I've been promised my entire life that this is going to be the election where the monolithic black vote moves right. And I would love for this to be the time that it's true. But I don't think Republicans should bank on that fact. Again, I really hope they're making inroads. That would be a sea change in electoral politics, especially if it's not just a one-time thing, but this actually breaks the hegemony that the left has had on that vote. But again, it's a narrative heard over and over again. And while I hope it's true, you shouldn't plan your entire election right.
Yeah, and yet it seems, I think that's what the plan is, the idea too big to rig. We've seen that before anyway. The commentary lately about if Biden stays on the ticket, then all the down ballot elections are affected. But if I remember right, in 2020, President Trump, quote, lost the election and down ballot did pretty good for red.
Yeah, again, I really wonder how much this matters when it comes to switching the candidates. Ultimately, what they're hoping is that Trump is himself toxic to the ticket, right? They're hoping that the narrative they've built around having a convicted felon on the ticket is toxic enough to the right that they don't show up, they don't come out in numbers, that suppresses the vote, and maybe that hits not only the president, but the down ballot as well. But what we've seen is that all of their attempts to go ahead and flip the script on that have failed them. It seems like actually Trump voters are more energized than the Republican base is more energized by the way that they've attacked Trump. And so I don't think that they can count for kind of this suppression that they were betting on by bringing that criminal narrative against Trump.
Well, if Biden has 240 million in his war chest, I recall that Trump made that in 3 days once they dubbed him a felon. So I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, as we're getting close to this election, you're really close to the people. You're talking to everyone. What do you think is going to be the key thing that the American people can do between now and the election to ensure we have some kind of stability again? Of course, the goal is to have President Trump back in office. Everything was better under Trump. That's a fact. But what do we need to do to secure that in your mind?
Obviously, the thing that you need to do is encourage your friends and family to get involved. You need to make sure that people are getting those early votes in. Going ahead and playing that ballot game is very important. But I think what's also important is not just the presidential race. Your local elections are going to have a massive impact. And those are the things that are going to be important to enable the framework going forward, whether Trump is in power or not. Mm-hmm. So I think while obviously people need to be voting for Trump, I think that it's really important to also take action on those state and local races as well.
You're so right. I mean, when we look at the game that was played with the district attorneys across the country and George Soros strategically placing his people in those offices and what has happened now in the legal system and the justice system, it is so imperative. Thank you for bringing that up and bringing attention to that, because the federal, it just blows my mind, Oren, that we ever felt the presidency this much in America. My understanding was we're a constitutional republic and states governed states. I'm just shocked. I really am at this point in history that everything seems to be riding on one person.
As somebody who lives in Florida and felt the positive impact of Governor DeSantis's action during COVID and beyond, the way that he's thrown outsourced DAs and this kind of thing, I think that we all should recognize that, of course, national politics still matter. Of course, the presidency still matters. But more and more, it's imperative that we get power back to the states, that states get in the habit of exercising their constitutional power and restricting the federal government's access to all of these programs, all of these issues that they have pushed into D.C. And the only way we do that is, once again, involving ourselves in state politics so we can strengthen those coalitions, strengthen the lead that red states have, and go ahead and build it in other states so that we empower these executives to make changes with their legislatures that can defend us against the central government.
Thank you so much, Oren McIntyre. Your show is the Oren McIntyre Show on The Blaze, and we look forward to seeing more of you. Thank you so much. Turning now to a deal you cannot miss. All of you out there know that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of the big box stores and the shopping channels they used to. They've effectively been canceled. So they're going to pass on tremendous savings for you in their new $25 extravaganza campaign. When Mike started MyPillow, it was a problem solution company, and they had one single product. You may not know, they have hundreds of American-made products now. Starting with the beach towels that are $25, the MyPillow sandals, $25. You can get their 6-pack towel sets also for $25. And one of my personal favorites is the 4-pack hand towel set, also $25. You're also going to receive Mike's Movies absolutely free with any size order. Simply go to mypillow.com, use the code Dobbs, and enjoy your shopping. You can also call 1-800-977-9152, use the promo code Dobbs, and speak to one of their incredible employee owners. This is your opportunity to support American-made, American manufacturing, and enjoy the best products on the market. And join Lou on his podcast, The Great America Show. The Marxist anti-business policies of Biden's Securities and Exchange Commission could imperil retirement vehicles in the private sector. It is hard to think of a more anti-prosperity president in modern history than Joe. Here now to discuss this with us is Norm Champ, who recently wrote about how Biden is threatening your 401ks and IRAs. Norm is the former SEC Director of Investment Management and author of Going Public and a Whistleblower, giving us an inside look at what really happens.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting to be watching what the president is doing right now. How is Biden threatening retirement accounts and investment funds?
Yeah. So one of the developments in the Biden administration has been a dramatic drop in the number of initial public offerings, so public companies listing of U.S. companies. And so we are down from the peak in the 90s till now. We're basically down by half in the number of U.S. public companies that are publicly traded. What that means is that all of our retirement accounts in 401ks and IRAs are getting jammed into fewer and fewer public stocks, meaning the risk in our retirement accounts is rising because all of us are exposed generally to the same small group of stocks.
So in your writing, you just wrote a really great piece on this that everyone should go read so they understand what's going on. These are the finer points of money that the average American kind of struggles to understand. But you mentioned in there that there's been a decline of almost 4,000, almost 50% since 1996. That really just narrows the margin and the competition, right, for us to be able to invest our money in all the different opportunities, the choices and options that we have. What has been this environment that's been created that prevents more growth?
So it's been a variety of policies that have been pursued, generally since the financial crisis, so it really goes back before that. But all of these policies are to force public companies in America to disclose things like ESG and, conflict minerals and all these different topics that often have nothing to do with their business. Disclosing all of that and talking about it is expensive. And we have shareholder strike suits that plaintiffs' lawyers bring, which if you get it wrong, then the company has to pay. So it's become very unpleasant to be a public company and very expensive. And so the number of initial public offerings of stocks under Joe Biden has fallen off a cliff. 2021, they were still somewhat there based on the Trump policies. But once we reached the Biden administration, the number of public offerings has really declined dramatically.
When you went from the private sector to working for the Securities and Exchange Commission, what was the biggest shock to you?
So I wrote a whole book about all the shocks going public that you mentioned. There's a lot of things, but I think maybe the thing that's hardest is to look at all of the data that is coming into the Securities and Exchange Commission and the difficulty that they have in using that data. And that has to do with lack of technology and lack of resources and so forth. I think it got a little better in the Trump SEC and using data. But honestly, what's most shocking is they have so much data that could be used to help our capital markets, help more companies go public, help the economy, right? Because companies that go public, that's a company that's been founded, is successful, and then is offering its shares to the public. And like you noted, now all of us can invest in that same successful business. But if we end up where we are now, which is fewer and fewer companies, we are not getting that opportunity, right? We're not getting that exposure to new companies. One statistic from an article just this week there is an index of stocks called the Wilshire 5000 that is a sort of smaller stock index. Currently, it has 3,300 names in it. It's 1,700 names short. So, this is a real problem.
So Norm, do you think it's incompetence or is this purposeful? Having all this data that they could use to empower the American people and corporations, and they're not doing it.
So I think that policymakers, unfortunately, are not always looking at that data and understanding the impact of their actions. You hear it all the time, the unintended consequences of policy. And I wish that, and part of what I argue about in my book is, let's try to be more evidence-based, right? So I think the evidence would show that increasing regulation in these markets and all the disclosures, and as I said in my recent article, if you're a public company CEO and you get in, something goes wrong, you get to go down to the Senate and get yelled at by the Senate Finance Committee, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be great if policymakers would look at all of that and say, hey, we're really having a decline here. That's limiting retirement plan choice. That's limiting all choices for investors. How about we pursue some policies that actually would encourage companies to go public?
Let's talk about that, because everything was better under Trump. What did he do that brought back this surge of public traded companies and was, helping everybody?
So during the Trump administration, a product called a special purpose acquisition company, SPAC, and I don't want to get too technical here, but that product roared. And essentially what that is a public company is created, and then it goes and looks for a private company to merge with so that they become a public company. Then the resulting merger is a public company. SPACs boomed. And actually, during the Trump administration, the decline in public companies stopped and turned around for the first time in basically 20 years. Unfortunately, when we got into the Biden administration, they took a number of steps to essentially stop the SPAC boom, and they have succeeded in doing that. And so the number of offerings is declining again rapidly. And I think that if we look, I would be the first to admit, and I have also published articles, SPACs have their issues and they could be reformed. I think it would be a good idea to take a look at them. But it is a way for us to get more public companies, more choices for all of us in our retirement accounts. I would love to see the decisions that have basically cratered the SPAC market. I'd like to see those decisions revisited.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying. These policies of either incompetence or policy or not wanting to see the average American person be able to get ahead, whichever it might be, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for the moment. When you combine it with this move, along with the proposal, the 22 proposal that you write about also to require environmental, social, and governance disclosures by these U.S. publicly traded companies, again, those things, they impact us. They impact us, the common man, and they limit our choices and our options, not the top 10% of wealth in this world, in this country. It impacts us. So what is the solution here when government really can just elevate or decimate a company, as you pointed out, by bringing them before the Senate, or they have the ability to create policies that allow us to grow and produce? What is the solution here for the regular person and truly for public companies going forward?
So you touch on all the right themes. I think what's so important is 401ks and IRAs that made stock investing available to basically the majority of Americans, right? That was revolutionary. And that gave all of us a stake, other than government employees who have pensions, gave all of us a stake in US economic growth. And so by pursuing policies like you mentioned of requiring ESG disclosure, if your company doesn't have anything to do with ESG type stuff, you're going to get that disclosure wrong. It's going to be expensive to do it. And then you're probably going to get sued. So if there was one thing that we could do, it's stop mandating these disclosures by companies on these political hot topics. Remember, we grew into the incredible engine that our markets are with a standard of materiality. All companies have to disclose what's material. What's material now is different than what it was in 2000, 1975, 1950. That standard can evolve. But instead, the politicians are mandating disclosures on hot political topics, and that is no way to run a public capital market that you want to be the world's leader.
It's really incredible to think about. We see the government has so much power. They have so much control. You'll see the average American, they'll come together over Bud Light or Target or Walmart, and that's really powerful and effective. But here, the government literally can weaponize against thousands of companies, as you mentioned, who aren't going along with the game and destroy their businesses, destroy their companies. It's such an unfair balance that we're in right now. And I think when you're talking about the common man, the everyday person, this gives them, me, us, the opportunity to get ahead, to take the little bit of wealth we've created, invest it, and really grow something for our families. When I see what you wrote about this, and what I view as an attack on business and on business creation, it really is frustrating to me as the regular person. This applies to us, to the common person. What you wrote about, what government is doing, and how they're trying to snuff it out is meant to keep us from being able to prosper. Do you agree with that?
It's having that impact. And I really appreciate what you're saying, because every speech I ever gave when I was at the SEC, I always started with the people that are investing in mutual funds, which are regulated by the SEC, IRAs, which primarily 401ks and IRAs primarily invest in mutual funds. All those people are saving for real life things, house, kids' education, retirement, right? This is real stuff. And to play around with these disclosure rules for kind of political hot topics of the day, and it really is having a disproportionate impact on regular people. And it's such a shame. We really need to reverse these policies.
Norm Champ, thank you so much for your insight, perspective, and great solutions. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, national security and law enforcement expert Charles Marino joins us to talk about the invasion at the border and its severe consequences.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0. When I invented My Pillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. My Pillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature regulating thread. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
Now's the time to go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use the promo code to save 50% on your My Pillow 2.0. Not only that, for a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
mypillow.com.
Boston's Logan International Airport served as one of Biden's many shelters for illegal aliens across the country, a nexus for the ongoing invasion. But now, illegals who have been sleeping on the floor at the airport are being forced to leave due to a new state rule. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey gave these illegals until July 9th to clear out in exchange for taxpayer-funded room and board elsewhere. Typical liberal solution to liberal problems: make an existing issue worse using taxpayer dollars and then call it a fix. Meanwhile, in Texas, the State Department of Public Safety has arrested 12 dangerous criminal illegal aliens from its most wanted lists. Their crimes range from sexual assault to indecency with a child and discharging a firearm at a person. You can thank law enforcement in Texas for getting these guys off the streets. But the invasion continues every day under the Biden administration. Our men and women in uniform are fighting an uphill battle. With us now to discuss the border crisis is Charles Marino. Charles is the CEO of Sentinel Security Solutions and an expert on national security and law enforcement. Charles Marino, thank you so much for joining us on Dobbs Tonight. Why is it that Democrats cannot accept that Americans are sick and tired of this border policy down there? We don't believe them anymore.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You think the country would be united based on what this border crisis is doing to every community throughout the United States and the way it's made the country a much more dangerous place to live, especially at a time where we're facing more threats from more places than any time in our history. And also as the threat level is skyrocketing. You don't have to listen to me about that. The FBI director has been very clear in that sense when he's testified in front of Congress the past several times. So it's a very dangerous time. No country is secure without borders and border enforcement and enforcement of the immigration laws. And the American people need to understand that as they go about their daily lives and the numbers of those in the country illegally who cannot be thoroughly vetted goes up, so will the encounters between them and these illegals.
Some of these recent encounters, they've been talking about the 12 dangerous criminals that were, just captured in the state of Texas. These are people that are wanted for serious crimes, crimes against children, sexual assault, all of these things. And we're now being the ones responsible for hopefully finding them, secondly, catching them, and then detaining them, hopefully, and them not being released on some, some kind of made up rule again from the Biden administration. Every time they create a new policy surrounding this border, they make it 10 times worse. What are your thoughts on that, and what not only law enforcement could be doing, even with the federal government pushing as hard as they are to get them to do nothing and keep allowing this to pour in?
Well, this is where this current administration really is unprecedented, because if you go back and look at previous administrations, border security and immigration were always two primary pillars to protecting the homeland. You look at the reason why the Department of Homeland Security was created in response to the terrorist attacks of September 11th. And then you look at the policies of the Biden administration, which directly undercuts our entire Homeland Security apparatus. We know that CBP and ICE can't do their jobs. They're prevented from doing so. Even in their budgets, there's carve-out language from this administration that says the money cannot be used for enforcement, but must be used for processing. And what the Biden administration has proven to the American public, as much as they have claimed that previous administrations were inhumane in the way that they approached border security and immigration enforcement, they have proven that when you remove all process, all structure, and you abandon the federal responsibilities of enforcing the laws of this country, you actually create a much more dangerous environment, not just for Americans, but also for the illegals making the dangerous journey to the United States with an expectation that they're going to get into the country, which 95% of the time, they're correct. They're being let right in.
I mean, when we talk about that, people coming here under false premises, they're instantly sorry and regretful that they're here. They have no family. They've lost everything to get here. The stories we've heard of coyotes taking advantage of them. Recently saw a video of a young boy who had walked over 100 miles was with no adult. Some, great Samaritans took him in and helped him, get help. But these are the stories we're seeing play out, especially here in Texas, Arizona, California, and it's heartbreaking. There's nothing about these immigration policies that are virtuous, that are humane.
No, they're inhumane, and I stand by that statement. This administration has endangered so many people. Look at the unaccompanied minors, close to 600,000 in the United States. Health and Human Services is overseeing this humanitarian disaster. 100,000 children, whereabouts unknown in the country. These children have been trafficked here, given up by their families to the cartels, who have been empowered like no time in their history based on these policies, both financially and operationally. That's why we're starting to get hit so hard at our northern border. The diversity of threats coming across from the north is starting to mirror that of the south. And the Mexican cartels are doubling their money. Why only limit yourselves, if you're in the position of the cartels, to one border when you could hit us from both of our borders and double your money? So this is a huge problem. We know the cartels are working with China to kill hundreds of thousands of Americans with fentanyl. We know the cartels are working with terrorist organizations like ISIS and ISIS-K. We had 8 suspected terrorists hiding out in sanctuary cities, New York, LA, Philadelphia, from Tajikistan. It's impossible to thoroughly vet these people, but the rule of thumb of this administration has been let everybody in. Don't worry about whether or not we can thoroughly vet them, and we'll work that out once they're already in the country. It flies in the face of common sense.
Well, case in point, Logan International. How do we know all of the illegal immigrants that are being housed there are not criminals? How do we know?
No, we don't. Look, this would be like us, telling the American public you're going to be required to house people in your homes from over 180 different countries. You're going to keep your front door unlocked, and each home is going to take 10 people. Would you do it? No. So why are we swinging open the front door of the country and letting anyone in whose backgrounds we don't know? And this is the position we find ourselves in. No longer, if you notice, is the conversation about the dreamers or about the children, because they're all bad stories going on with criminals and terrorists taking over, coming into the country with an estimated 15 to 20 million, possibly higher. They still keep gotaways at 2 million. Those that are never encountered by CBP, that number is likely double. And then, of course, we've got a whole host of illegals coming into the country going completely undetected. And the natural assumption from a national security standpoint has to be that these are the most dangerous in the buckets of gotaways and those that come in completely undetected.
President Trump gets back in. Okay. What can he do immediately to not only curb the flow, which I think will naturally happen as it did before in 2016, but to remove all of these illegal aliens immediately?
Yeah, look, I outline it in my new book, Terrorists on the Border and in Our Country, and we're going to have to walk and chew gum on this one, but it can be done. Another 4 years of this administration, it would be very hard to get back. But look, after this 4 years, with the numbers I just mentioned, the type of dangerous people being let into the country, first thing that we need to do is seal that border. A pause on everything. We need to shut down illegal immigration. We need to put a pause on these false asylum claims that are being made and allowed to be made by this administration. We need to go after sanctuary cities. Congress needs to defund them. No more federal money going to sanctuary cities until they decide they want to join the rest of a civilized country and enforce the laws of this country. And then the other thing we need to do is deportation. We need to go after national security threats, criminal aliens. We need to bring back a program like Secure Communities that allows state and local law enforcement, if they encounter somebody in the country illegally that's violating a traffic law, then they need to be handed over to ICE and deported. We need to get a lot tougher with Mexico and other countries along the migration path. Mexico's our number one trading partner. Diplomacy isn't only about giving money. It's also about tough diplomacy. Mexico doesn't need to remain our number one trading partner if they don't want to be part of the solution. President Trump has proven that by getting programs like Remain in Mexico instituted as he was negotiating the NAFTA with the USMCA. We need to do the same with the countries like Panama down by the Darien Gap and say, look, you're going to step up or we're going to cut off your money. But, people that are overstaying visas, protesting on school campuses in support of Hamas, all of these folks need to be identified and prioritized for deportation. We're going to have a very large bucket of those in the country illegally that fail to comply with their notices to appear for their immigration hearings. ICE needs to be allowed and supported to conduct interior enforcement and get them out of the country. And then last, we need to go after the cartels in a whole different way. They're not just transnational criminal organizations anymore. They operate like terrorist organizations, and we need to bring a whole of government approach, including our military, to go after them, either with or without Mexico's cooperation.
Charles, thank you so much. Your book is Terrorists on the Border in Our Country. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Turning now to a deal you do not want to miss. All of you know that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of big box stores and shopping channels. They have effectively been canceled. So they're going to pass some serious savings onto you during the $25 extravaganza. When Mike Lindell started his company, it was a problem solution single item company, but now he has hundreds of great American-made products. So you get to try them and share them now. We have our beach bath towels, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. 6-pack towel sets, just $25. One of my favorites is the 4-pack dish towel set, also $25. To top it off, you're going to get all of Mike Lindell's videos completely free. There's such a beautiful array. You're going to love them all. Now for a limited time. So make sure you go to mypillow.com, use the code Dobbs, D-O-B-B-S. You can also call 1-800-977-9152. Talk to one of the great employee owners and support American-made, American manufacturing, and you will love the quality of these great products. Use the code Dobbs. And join Lou on his podcast, The Great America Show. I want to thank you so much for being with us. I know you're missing Lou. He'll be back very soon. Join us tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central. And as always, God bless and good night.